If you've been trying to follow what's happening with Iran over the last few days, it may be confusing, and I understand why. Nobody is telling the same story about what's going on. This is supposedly the most ended war in history. Trump ended this thing like 40 times already. We're in the middle of negotiations to get a deal, and it seems to be imploding once again. So here is the sequence, and we'll just try to piece it together as we go. Of course, last week, the week before, who knows at this point, Donald Trump says we have a ceasefire, the war is over, we just have to negotiate at this point in time. Fine. And then over the weekend, after J.D. Vance left Switzerland's negotiations after fewer than 48 hours, it didn't go particularly well, the United States carries out new strikes against Iranian targets. And Trump says, oh, Iran violated the ceasefire. He posted, quote, United States aircraft just struck Iranian missiles and drone storage locations and coastal radar sites for violating the ceasefire agreement again. It is very possible that they will never learn. There may come a point when we are no longer able to be reasonable and will be forced to militarily complete that job that we very successfully started. If that happens, the Islamic Republic of Iran will no longer exist. So Donald Trump, in the middle of a ceasefire, in the middle of a negotiation to end the most ended war in history again, goes, by the way, we also might destroy Iran. Ceasefire, maybe, deal, I'm not sure, JD is negotiating, and we might destroy the country, and the country of Iran will be no more. Okay, so that doesn't sound so good. And then Senator Roger Marshall gets asked a very straightforward question. If we are still bombing at this point in time, how can the administration say that the war is over? And instead of answering the question directly, Roger Marshall goes, well, the major war is over. This is just a mop-up operation. We now have categories of war. It is not major war anymore. Oh, thank God.
Let's start with the war in Iran. The war now there has passed 120 days. Secretary Rubio testified that the war is over, yet overnight the U.S. launched new strikes inside Iran. If the U.S. is still bombing Iran 120 days into this conflict, how can the Trump administration credibly say the war is over?
Well, Ryan, look, I'm just going to stay focused on what my goals have been all along. No nukes for Iran, no forever wars, bring the cost of gas and grocery down. The major war is over, and think of this as almost just a mop-up operation. We have to press them. If they strike us, we have to strike them back by 10. We're making great progress. To your point about Secretary Rubio, he just made a great landmark case over in Lebanon and Israel, getting those folks together. Look, let's root for the Trump team for once rather than try to tear him down. So I think we're doing what we need to do, making great progress here. Oh, yeah. And again, working toward those goals. No nukes for Iran, no forever wars, and let's keep bringing that.
No nukes for Iran. No nukes for Iran. So the war is basically over, but it's a mop-up operation with just a little bit of bombing. A little bit of bombing is all we need. Then things get even weirder. Axios reported the United States and Iran are expected to meet in Doha very soon to continue negotiations rather. And Trump goes on Truth Social and he posts in all capital letters, Iran has requested a meeting. It will take place tomorrow in Doha. Sounds definitive, except then Iranian officials come out and say, actually not so fast. Iran's senior negotiator says, no meetings have really been scheduled this week, and we are talking about scheduling a meeting. Hey, quickly, have you been seeing less of me on your YouTube feed? You would not be the first to say so. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube to ensure you don't miss a thing. Back to the clip. So, review. The war is going to last 3 weeks, and it lasts 16. It ends 40 times during that 16 weeks. But then it really ends because we're going to get a deal, except the deal is only a letter and we're going to have 60 days to get the deal. But after 42 hours, J.D. Vance goes, I don't think we're going to get a deal. And the Iranian negotiators walked out. But we've still got a ceasefire and we're negotiating, except that there's bombing. And we'll destroy Iran if we need to. But the war is over. And also negotiations are happening today, except Iran goes, we don't know anything about that. Nothing's been scheduled. But we have a ceasefire, except everybody's bombing. And it was violated really badly but everybody's doing really well. So at some point, you have to just go, what is the administration's real position here? If you're trying to explain this to someone who's been paying half attention, it's impossible. If you've been paying attention, you know that they're just lying. And it's clarification, another qualification, another explanation, and then a contradiction. And what I think is becoming Donald Trump's real problem is less about whether you support the Iran policy or oppose it. Like you might think we needed to do something about Iran, or it was a bad idea to go in. I happen to think it was a bad idea to go in. The problem for Trump is much simpler. People need to understand what is actually happening. If the message keeps changing, and if each official describes the situation differently, if the other side is publicly contradicting your announcements, people don't even know what to believe. And there's this old saying in politics, you fool me once. No, not that one. There's this other old saying, if you're explaining, you're losing. And the administration is at the point where they're not even really explaining. They're explaining their prior explanations during an international conflict. And they're not being clear and they're not being confident. They're just being confused. That is really the story here. And nobody inside of the administration seems capable of describing the situation the same way twice. Now, what is really happening in Iran? What are we expecting to see? I have no idea other than to acknowledge that political concerns usually end up trumping everything else. And for all the talk about Trump had to do this, national security, blah, blah, blah. Once it gets to the point where people are going to start casting ballots, early voting and absentee ballots, et cetera, I cannot imagine that Donald Trump is going to want to keep this going. And that goes, in fact, to the leverage that Iran has over Donald Trump. As I said before, we have the 60-day negotiation period that would run roughly. By the way, I say it like it's a real thing. I don't even know that either side still gives a damn about that original 60-day timeline. We're like 8 scandals and contradictions removed from that. But at least in theory, we had a 60-day period that ran roughly from June 19th to August 19th. Iran knows that August 19th gets dangerously close to when people start submitting absentee and early voting ballots for the midterms. And Trump is unlikely to want to restart the war in earnest so close to people voting. However, the counterpoint is it may not be restarting because it doesn't really seem that the war is ending at all. So where will we be in 3 months? Your guess is as good as mine. And this gets to, I don't think Trump really has what it takes to even manage this. That's what I want to talk about next. Thanks for watching. Check out this other video. And if you like our content, make sure to subscribe so YouTube puts our videos in your feed, and subscribe to the podcast on Spotify and Apple.